You're listening to Simply the Best Sports Take, the best podcast breaking down the best stuff in sports with host Sean Bingham. His takes are so good, he dropped the mic, but then you wouldn't be able to hear him, and that would suck.
Welcome into STB Sports Take, Simply the Best Sports Podcast. I am your host, Sean Bingham. Thank you for being here. We are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor Podcasts. Everywhere you get your podcasts, we are there. Thank you for joining us. Please hit that subscribe button. Today is a fun podcast, guys, interviewing my very close friend, Spencer Linton. Had a bunch of other stuff I wanted to talk about, but the interview with him, I've already recorded it, so I'm going to put it up right now. It went so well, I'm just going to show that. And then Monday, I'll probably talk about my NFL power rankings. I'm going to let one more week of NFL football go by before I do those power rankings. MVP race. Right now, it's got to be Lamar Jackson. The guy is freaking on fire. But tons of BYU football talk right now. We're going to talk about Zach Wilson, the loss against Boise State, the upcoming game against Baylor, my comment about the Mountain West being not that much ahead, the new Big 12 after Oklahoma and Texas leave, not being that much ahead of the old Mountain West with TCU, Utah, and BYU. You're going to be surprised at Spencer Linton's response to that. And so here's the interview. Okay, joining us now live from Waco, Texas, is the voice, the face, the star of BYU Sports Nation, Spencer Linton. My good friend, Spencer, thanks for being here again.
It's great to be with you. And for the first time ever in my life, from, as you said, Waco, Texas, man, getting ready for a ranked BYU team on the road against a pretty good Baylor team.
Yes, and that, this is how this whole thing started. You just said a ranked BYU team against a pretty good Baylor team. I argue that they should be ranked. I'll admit, and we just had a little thing where it went to your profile picture there, by the way. But anyway, I had tweeted that I looked at your rankings, which I love that they were very, because obviously it's going to help BYU if Baylor is ranked right now. That would help their cause. And you, being very objective, did not rank Baylor. And I just said, what, no Baylor? I was probably the one being biased and wanting to have Baylor up in the rankings so that BYU could beat another ranked opponent. But tell me your reasoning why you didn't think Baylor belonged.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I wanted Baylor to be ranked. It became a matter of, okay, well, who do they displace? Because when you look at Baylor's resume right now and you think 5-1, okay, really good. Like, their offensive numbers are really good. You look at Pro Football Focus, they're really, really explosive in certain categories. They are averaging a ridiculous number on yards per rush, but you have to look at who they have played. And quite frankly, through 6 games, BYU's resume is much stronger than Baylor's 5-1, which is why the Cougars are still ranked number 19. BYU's got a win over an Arizona State team that might win the Pac-12. Certainly, we think are probably going to win the Pac-12 South if they get through Utah this weekend. And then Utah's starting to play some better football in wake of their tragedies, and they seem to have kind of found a groove and knocking off USC. But the reason I left them out is because their best win right now is against an Iowa State team that opened the season in the top 10, but we've quickly found out that the Cyclones are not what we thought they would be. They're 3-2. They are unranked. And Baylor beat the Cyclones by 2 points here in Waco. That was a tough home game. Their losses to the only ranked team on their schedule, and that was at Oklahoma State, a 10-point loss. So aside from a nice win against Iowa State, who else have they beaten? I mean, they played FCS Texas Southern. They beat a bad Texas State team, an awful Kansas team, and they just beat a really bad West Virginia team that's 2-4. So there's not a ton of meat on the bone right now. If Baylor beats BYU tomorrow, that would be the signature win on their schedule thus far. That would eclipse what they've done against Iowa State because BYU is a ranked team. And so there just wasn't quite enough on the bone through 6 games for me to say, you know what, Baylor deserves to be ranked above a 4-2 Texas team that, let's face it, they blew it against Oklahoma. They should have won that game. Texas should be the top 20 team, 5-1, and Oklahoma should be out of the top 10. But as it stands, what a meltdown. And Oklahoma wins that game with their backup quarterback, and they got a mess going there. So, there just wasn't enough there. Baylor deserves to get votes, but to me, they don't deserve to be in the top 25 unless and until they beat BYU.
Yeah. What about, I had mentioned maybe a 4-2 Arkansas team could be ranked below Baylor. Now, Arkansas has played a really tough schedule so far. but they lost them. I've got their schedule up on the screen here to my right. So if I'm looking off the screen, that's why, but they lost 37-0 to Georgia. Okay. So not even competitive. They lost to Mississippi. They did beat Texas A&M, who, obviously just beat, was it A&M that just beat Alabama?
Alabama. Yes. Yeah. And now A&M's ranked again.
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, they've actually had a tough schedule. So I'm going to revoke this comment because they played Texas. They played Texas A&M, Georgia, and Mississippi. They've played 4 ranked teams.
And they have 2 wins, right? They beat Texas.
Yeah.
Beat A&M.
Yeah.
So you've knocked off a couple of top 25 teams, albeit Texas is just hanging on in the top 25, but still some quality wins. And Georgia seems like the team. I mean, they're special, right? Arkansas had to go between the hedges into Georgia. Georgia's going to do that to a bunch of other good SEC teams until they probably face Alabama in the SEC championship. So
yeah,
I feel like Georgia's like tier 1, and then it's everybody else right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Arkansas is kind of there with Ole Miss, and that was a shootout. I mean, 52-51.
Yeah.
If they get the 2-point conversion, all of a sudden Arkansas is 5-1, and they're ranked above Ole Miss. So it's a fluky deal.
Yeah, no, that's true. So the other team I mentioned was NC State. Obviously they beat Clemson, which my argument on this podcast has been too often in college football, you're ranked based on your tradition, your history, and so your name. So Clemson has the name Clemson. But like in reality, they're 3-2. They're not that good. You just were quick to say, oh, Iowa State, the Cyclones were not what we thought they were. They're 3-2. Well, Clemson's in that same boat, and that's NC State's only real signature win, and it's against a team that's clearly not as good as we thought they were.
Yeah, that's probably the best point you have of 3 teams that you brought up. It is the NC State factor, but because Clemson is who they are, and as unfair as it might be, the cachet that they still brought into that game is what initially vaulted NC State into the rankings conversation because Clemson was ranked. We're learning a little bit more now about what Clemson is and their offensive struggles. So just maybe if NC State isn't impressive or some other teams have some big wins that are just outside the top 25, you could see a team like NC State maybe drop out of the AP rankings. So, I mean, you have a great point there. There's not a ton on NC State's resume right now other than that Clemson win, which was at home in North Carolina. But they'll be tested throughout the rest of the season. They'll have to do some things against other ACC teams to try and hold on to that ranking.
Yeah, because, I mean, so they're 4-1, whereas Baylor 5-1?
Yeah, Baylor's 5-1.
So they played 6 games, they're 5-1. So NC State's only 4-1, and they've beat UCF. Southern Florida, not UCF, not Central, but Southern Florida. They beat Furman, which, okay, and they beat Louisiana Tech. So those are their, and then of course Clemson that we mentioned, and then they lost to Mississippi State. So I don't know. To me, I would have loved to see Baylor, ranked this week because it could help BYU. But in the end, if Baylor can end the season ranked, that probably matters a lot more anyway. I wanted to ask you though, one thing I said on my podcast just a couple days ago, and tell me if I'm crazy, because you know BYU football a lot better than I do. If BYU runs the table from here, which if I'm being honest, I think it's unlikely. I think we probably drop another one. But if we do, is there a chance, still a hope, a shred of hope at a New Year's Six Bowl? Obviously, the playoffs are completely gone. Is there a chance we can leapfrog Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina, some of these other non-P5 schools, and get into a New Year's Six Bowl?
Absolutely. And right now, the way things are pacing for Cincinnati, the Bearcats are maybe in a position to become the playoff buster as the first group of 5 team. And if Cincinnati gets into the playoff, that in turn opens up a New Year's Six spot for the next highest group of 5 team, or even a team like BYU. So think about this. Okay, BYU is going to play 7 Power 5 teams. They've already played 3 and won all of them, all Pac-12 teams. So BYU is right now de facto tied for first place in the Pac-12 South, even though they're not a member of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
They got USC later and Washington State to add to that Pac-12 resume later. But if BYU beats all 7 Power 5 teams on the schedule, and they have the lone weird anomaly loss against Boise State at home in the middle of the season, there's enough time for BYU to work their way back up the rankings and impress the college football playoff committee. Last year, the college football playoff committee was all about, well, who has BYU played and beaten? I mean, their signature wins were at Houston and at Boise State. Not a ton there because both of those programs were kind of just okay last year. BYU didn't have any control over that. I mean, they played whoever they could play. It was an incredible, fun season. Got Zach Wilson and 4 other BYU players drafted. But this year, there's no argument against that. Well, who have they played? Well, they played 3 Power Fives to open the season, started 5-0, lost to a Boise State team that's not great, but still a respected program. And then if they run the table, they beat 4 other Power 5 teams to go 7-0, 11-1. Sean, they're going to be a top 10 team if they run the table. ESPN's Football Power Index says that BYU has about a 3% chance to run the table. But that number goes up significantly if BYU can find a way to win at Baylor as a 6.5-point underdog right now. That will go up to like around 15% to run the table if BYU can survive Waco. But how do you keep an 11-1 BYU team that's in the top 10 and the College Football Playoff Committee? I just don't see any way they'd be like, well, they don't have the resume for it. What are you talking about? They beat the ranked Arizona State team. We think that Baylor's going to be pretty good. They're going to win 8 or 9 games, we think, this year and coming out of the Big 12. So if there's some meat there on BYU's resume bone, then how do you keep that team out of a New Year's Six game if they're 11-1 and they've been invited to the Big 12? The cachet is up. Even if they don't join that conference in 2023, the stock is up on BYU right now. Coming off an 11-1 season, they're 5-1 right now. There's absolutely a chance. They just need Arizona State to keep winning. And if they beat Baylor, they need Baylor to be pretty good too. That's what's going to get BYU into the New Year's Six, is if their resume holds up for the remainder of the season.
And it wouldn't hurt if Boise State keeps winning, even though they're not a Power 5. If Boise can end the season 9-3 or 8-4, that could help. So I want to ask you, what happened against Boise State? I mean, what on earth? Like, I mean, obviously you're there on the field every game. I'm in the stands, and I'm just watching that game, and we get off to the 10-0 lead, and I'm like, sweet. This is going to be great. And then just everything falls apart. The rain comes, fumbles start flying everywhere. What happened? What happened in that game?
It was almost like BYU thought that once they started 10-0, and I know that, if you talk to the players, they're going to point to, self-inflicted mistakes and whatnot, but it was almost like there was this feeling of, BYU's up 10-0. They're off to another fast start. Here comes the rain. Boise State's probably just going to nail it in, except that they're not going to beat BYU. But to the Broncos' credit, they continued to ground and pound, and their offensive line did something that they haven't been able to do all year against any team they've played, and that is move the defensive front. Boise State was averaging under 80 yards rushing per game coming in. They were below 100 in terms of national ranking with the rush offense, and they just moved BYU's defensive line. It was weird. And like you said, it happened after the rain. So it was almost like BYU relaxed a little bit. And then when Boise State kicked the field goal, and then they recovered that first fumble inside BYU's 25 and scored. And then Lopini Katoa fumbled on the ensuing kickoff. So we're talking about 2 consecutive offensive plays for BYU where they fumble both inside the 25-yard line, and then Boise State takes the lead. It was almost like BYU hit the panic button early, because if you remember, they go for it, BYU on 4th down inside their own territory again right before halftime, trailing 17-10, like, we got to get some momentum back. If BYU just punts the ball, then they take a 7-point deficit into halftime, but instead they allow Boise State to stop them on 4th and 2, drive down the field, kick a field goal. It's a 10-point lead, and Boise State gets the ball after halftime. It just kind of felt like the panic button was pushed, and they could never really recover. So I think that BYU got a little bit too aggressive too early, going for it on 4th down, and then trying to play catch up against a team that was happy to be disciplined and run the ball and be methodical with that 10-point lead. I mean, let's face it. If you're -4 in the turnover margin, I don't care who you're playing. You're not going to beat South Florida. You're not going to beat Utah State. You're not going to beat a terrible Arizona team. You're -4. You're going to lose to everybody that BYU's played on that schedule. And it kind of felt like all of the turnovers that BYU did not commit in the first 5 wins all got jumbled into that one game. And there were so many uncharacteristic mistakes. So in a roundabout way, just so many turnovers. And then I think a little bit too much of a panic scenario too early in the game when there was plenty of time left. But hopefully BYU's coaches and staff and players learn from that. They can recalibrate. And if the cost of beating Baylor is losing to Boise State the week prior, then so be it. Let's just get BYU to 6-1 and see what they can do.
Yeah. And so it's interesting you mentioned that the cost of beating Baylor, could it be the loss to Boise State? Because I had, and I mentioned this on my podcast on Monday, I had a friend, very trusted friend, and it's kind of a big deal. So I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but he had one of the BYU coaches just 2 days before the game that he's friends with, bragging to him that they were going to beat Boise by 30. And my thought is like, dude, if the coach is bragging to his buddies like that, what kind of messages is he sending to the players? Were they overlooking Boise State? It looked like maybe they were. I don't know, but maybe that is the cut. Hopefully, if they were preparing for Baylor and they can win on Saturday. But yeah, I don't know. Had you heard anything about that? What do you make of that? If you have a coach saying we're going to win by 30,
Well, I mean, I get it. Overconfidence is something that teams that win consistently all struggle with. Alabama goes into Texas A&M as a heavy favorite, and they come out with the loss. It feels like no team is safe in college football this year, other than what we talked about, Georgia. It feels like Georgia is the team, right? They're special right now. But
I thought Alabama was right there with Georgia until they lost. So it's like, who knows?
Sure. Like a surprising loss. I hadn't heard anything specific to BYU coaches talking about, rolling Boise, but I will say this. The fact that BYU started Jaron Hall when he clearly was not healthy enough to run tells me that they thought that they could handle Boise State up front with the run game and Tyler Algier, and Jaron Hall being a pocket passer and more of a game manager would be enough. Yeah. And if BYU doesn't turn the ball over 4 times, they're probably right. But when you bring in the turnovers, the fact that they started Jaron Hall maybe tells me that they were a little too comfortable with, we should be okay, even if our quarterback can't do everything that we usually get from him. I almost, at that point, I'm like, man, if Jaron Hall couldn't run, maybe BYU needed a fully healthy quarterback in Jacob Conover, even though he's a freshman and there's pressure on. Jacob Conover can run around pretty well. People don't talk about that. He was a good, at times, dual threat option for his acclaimed high school program in Arizona that he played at with Gunnar Romney. So maybe BYU got a little bit too comfortable thinking that they could push Boise around. And to the Broncos' credit, they were physical and they played really, really tough football up front and caught BYU off guard. So I don't know if it was overconfidence or maybe a little bit of overlooking, but it happens to the best. Even when they were preached to all week, don't drink the poison. It kind of felt like they did a little bit when they got up early 10-0.
It did. We're ranked 10th. You got to think back, imagine you're 20 years old and you're 10th in the country and you're hot stuff and and I just think you can kind of drink your own Kool-Aid to the point where it's, it comes back to bite you. So, okay. You mentioned a couple things there. One, Jaron Hall, his health, is he good to go for Baylor? What are you hearing there?
Yeah, so we spoke with offensive coordinator Aaron Roderick earlier this week, and he used the phrases, we're going to have Jaron let it rip and cut it loose, which tells me a couple of things. They're going to have him throw the ball and be more aggressive that way, and cutting it loose means they're going to have some designed runs for him. I apologize for going back to that profile picture. It's a special one.
That's okay.
But I digress. Aaron Roderick, when he says cut it loose, they're going to have some design run plays for Jaron Hall. If it's the run pass option, which was not instituted against Boise State, they should have some of those plays. They've got to have Baylor be aware of and have to take account of Jaron Hall's ability to run the ball. I mean, think about it. If BYU doesn't have Jaron Hall running the ball against Arizona, Utah, and Arizona State, they probably don't win those 3 games. And we're not having this conversation about BYU being a top 20 team, even after a loss with the potential to make a New Year's 6 run. They needed Jaron Hall's legs. They needed him against Boise State. Wasn't an option because he started and wasn't healthy enough. So if he's true to his word and they cut it loose, expect Jaron Hall to have at least a few designed run plays with Tyler Algier there. And also here is the sneaky thing that nobody or very few people are talking about. Mason Wake, BYU's fullback, is expected to play this week against Baylor. He missed the Utah State game. He missed the Boise State game.
Yeah.
BYU had a little bit of trouble getting Tyler Algier loose to second level, even against Utah State and certainly against Boise State.
Oh, yeah.
Mason Wake is back. He is the key to this BYU run game moving forward. That combined with Jaron Hall having to be accounted for and his dynamic running ability, those two things I think will really help BYU tomorrow, as will the return of offensive lineman Harris LaChance. So really it's three things that BYU get back in their favor in preparation for Baylor. We just got to have, the run game get going with Mason Wake, Harris LaChance, and Jaron Hall, his ability to run. So watch for those things for BYU to be a pro as they go into McLean Stadium.
So what are BYU's chances against Baylor? What's your prediction? Do you have one?
So I like to think about it in terms of if they played the game 10 times, if they played this game 10 times, how many would BYU win? Yeah. And I think it's probably 4. BYU probably wins 4 out of 10, given the location, the circumstances, and a little bit of a mental funk that they're coming out of after the loss to Boise State. If BYU can score early or create a turnover scenario where the homecoming crowd in Waco kind of has the wind taken out of it collectively, then it could get a little bit weird. I mean, case in point, Boise State has 2 quick turnovers. They scored 2 touchdowns. How quickly did the air go out of LaVell Edwards Stadium and it become panic mode where it's like, oh, what's happening? Like I didn't expect this to happen. If BYU can do that, start quick, maybe create an early turnover, and at least hold the home fans in Waco at bay a little bit, then I like their chances to progress a lot more. But, yeah, they played the game 10 times. I'd say BYU wins 4 out of 10, so 40% chance that BYU wins this game, and they're 6-1 climbing the polls.
Yeah, that's fair. So would you say this is the toughest game remaining on BYU's schedule, or do you look at USC and think, they just got beat pretty bad by the Utes. What are you making of the remaining schedule, I guess, for BYU?
Yeah, for sure. To me, this is the toughest remaining game.
Yeah.
USC is a hot mess right now. They fired their coach 3 games into the season. They're dealing with some quarterback woes. Keaton Slovis is not what he is supposed to be. There's so much talent there, but they're just kind of floating out there in Los Angeles. They might not even be bowl eligible, which is crazy. Like to think USC can't get to 6 wins, but their remaining schedule is really tough. They got to play Notre Dame. They got to play BYU. They just got rolled, as you mentioned, by Utah. So Waco and Baylor are the toughest game remaining on the schedule. Sneaky game is what happens when Bronco Mendenhall and Virginia return to Provo on October 30th. That, to me, is the second toughest remaining game, just because of the emotions and the potential distractions that are going to lead up to that game.
Yep. Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. Okay, I got a couple more things here, and I know you've probably got more important things you got to do down there, but I appreciate you taking time. 2 things. One, we're going to get to Zach Wilson in a minute, just because you and I had done the podcast about him, talking about his young professional career. But before that, I have to mention something that I've been getting a lot of heat from some BYU fans on the podcast when we had the Big 12 announcement. I'm stoked about BYU being in the Big 12. It's a huge upgrade from where we're at. Okay. Huge upgrade from where we're at. I made the comment, though, which I still stand by. I said competition wise, not money wise, not financially speaking, or even what's the word I'm looking for? Just overall notoriety speaking, but just from a pure competition standpoint, I said once Oklahoma and Texas leave, it's really not that much better than the old Mountain West with TCU and Utah and BYU, who were consistently ranked in the top 25, all 3 of them every year. And I just got bombarded from, BYU fans like, oh, are you a fan or not? Oh, what are you saying? You're crazy. A lot of them kept referring to the WAC. I'm like, I didn't say the WAC. I said the Mountain West with TCU, Utah, and BYU. Once Oklahoma and Texas leave, BYU is probably the face of the conference at that point.
Yeah, it's an intriguing question when you think about that. What's the premier program in the new Big 12? Is it up for grabs, or does it automatically fall to Oklahoma State?
Yeah, Oklahoma State would be the one.
I find it hard to think that it's going to be Ames, Iowa, and Iowa State, even though they have good programs.
Yeah.
Or is it a team like Baylor, if they can rebuild the football brand to match what they did in 2012 and 2013 when they won back-to-back Big 12 championships? Obviously, the basketball side of men's and women's, they've won national championships as early as last year.
Yeah. Sure, and you've got Kansas and basketball is all time.
Number 1 conference in America when it comes to basketball. Incredible women's and men's basketball conferences.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as football goes, football's still king. Who's the face of Big 12 football when Texas and Oklahoma leave? It's probably Oklahoma State right now.
Yeah.
And they're, a top 12 team right now. But after that, does BYU have the opportunity to jump in and say, hey, it's us? Or does Cincinnati somehow find enough money to keep Luke Fickell from going to USC and say, no, Cincinnati, we're the premier program? I think the Big 12 officials are hopeful that the new teams, Cincinnati, BYU, Houston, and UCF, can bolster that and that there can be a debate. Because after Oklahoma State right now, it's probably Baylor. And then who is it? West Virginia's down. Kansas is down. Kansas State's mediocre. TCU's mediocre. Like, it just there are a bunch of mediocre Power 5 teams other than Oklahoma State and Baylor right now in the Big 12, aside from Oklahoma and Texas. So maybe there's room. Maybe it is BYU or Cincinnati that comes in and it's like, hey, we'll take that second or third spot and we'll be the other ranked team in the new Big 12.
Do you think the Big 12 is going to add even more teams?
I don't think that's going to happen for a while if it does come to more expansion. And typically what causes more expansion is chaos, dominoes falling. In this case, it was Texas and Oklahoma leaving for the SEC and moving pieces around, or renewed television contract rights. But as we've learned, you have to have like a very valuable TV brand to be invited to a Power 5 conference. And without question, that's why BYU was the first call for Bob Bowlesby, the commissioner of the Big 12, was because you look at the TV ratings, the numbers they bring, the advertising capability and money that's earned from that because of BYU. It was an easy call once Texas and Oklahoma left. Say, hey, you are a premier brand. You play good football. BYU has a winning record against the Big 12 all time. They're 6-1 all time against Texas and Oklahoma. They can clearly compete. It's a good match. So, like, what other team's going to bring that type of revenue and the eyeballs? Boise State hopes it's them. Memphis hopes it's them. I don't know, Sean. I think right now it's the new Big 12, and we probably won't see any addition until a new TV contract comes into play, maybe in the 2030s.
So, fun stat, by the way, once Texas and Oklahoma leave, BYU will have the largest stadium in the Big 12.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. It's the real deal. I wanted to ask you just as a follow-up there, you're wearing your BYU TV shirt. Does the BYU TV, having our own network and everything, does it hurt at all with some of these negotiations when they're talking about TV deals when BYU's got its own? Because I thought about that, if a game's on ABC, but you can also watch it on, I guess I don't know how that works. So maybe educate me. Like if I can watch it on BYU TV, then ESPN or ABC, is it still aired on both? Or I guess I'm never paying attention to that.
So in independence, BYU and BYU TV have had some more leeway and freedom to kind of pick up home games in Provo across all of the sports. When BYU joins a conference, then BYU TV will join something called the third tier rights category. And which means, first tier rights go to the primary channel or sponsor of the Big 12, which right now is ESPN and Fox. So if ESPN and Fox say, you know what, we're going to pass on this home men's basketball game just because we've got other big games in the conference. So that's going to fall to the third tier partners. The Big 12 has used ESPN3 or Watch ESPN, the online version, as their primary third tier host. If it's a BYU game at home and the top two tiers don't take it, Fox and ESPN, that's where BYU TV can come in and say, hey, we'll broadcast the BYU, let's say, Kansas State men's basketball game, and we'll do it on BYU TV, and we'll let ESPN3 carry it as well. So it'll be kind of like broadcast on both avenues. That's where the Big 12 says, hey, great, you're an awesome partner. You're going to do high quality work. Yeah. We'll take your BYU TV feed and put our Big 12 logos and graphics into it, and we'll stream it on ESPN3, and we'll work in collaboration that way. Okay?
Interesting.
So it's more of a boon, I think. It's more of a draw for the Big 12 to say, well, we know you do quality work. If you'll let us have the feed that we can use our Big 12 logo on, and we can still stream it on ESPN3, then hey, we're good. And there will be more Olympic sports like women's volleyball, women's soccer, baseball, softball, that will get picked up by BYU TV at home and streamed on ESPN3. That will continue. There might not be as many games, but the opportunities absolutely will still exist for BYU TV to be a substantial partner and help in this scenario. So that's cool. It's not, we're not like, it's not a detraction or something that they look at as, oh man, we're going to have to deal with them. It's a partnership that they really like.
Yeah, that actually does make sense. I didn't know they were going to, but I mean, it makes perfect sense that they would just use the facilities and the talent that you guys have and just say, yeah, we're just going to slap our logo over the top. And yeah, that's cool. Okay, last thing, and then we'll let you go. We got to talk Zach Wilson. What's been your impression so far of his career to this point? He's had one really good game, and then the others not so much, but he doesn't have a ton to work with. I mean, the Jets are just awful. I feel bad for the guy having to be there, but what's your take so far?
Flashes of brilliance, which last time we discussed were important for Zach to have, like those moments where it's like, oh, this kid's got something. Like he's had enough of those to keep New York Jets fans and the entire really NFL fan base kind of intrigued. I mean, it has been rough for sure. And Zach has admitted as much, like, I got to let it loose. I got to stop overthinking things. I've got to find a way for me to help this team on offense start fast instead of constantly playing catch up and happen to do crazy things in the second half. So, and his head coach, Robert Saleh, just pointed out, have you looked at Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills quarterback, his first 5 games? His statistics are almost exactly in line with what Zach Wilson has done. Yeah. Now, the advantage that Josh Allen has is he's now been given just incredible weapons and like this amazing base of talent on offense and defense to work on. They're a championship caliber team in Buffalo right now. Can the Jets build that around Zach Wilson? And, 3 or 4 years in, we see, the offensive line able to protect him. But right now he's running for his life. At one point he was on pace to be sacked 80 times this year through 3 games. This is crazy. Like, is he going to survive? Yeah. So it's a comedy of errors right now. It feels like with the Jets, like offensive line's not good enough. The defense is a little bit better, but Zach Wilson's making some bad throws and he's trying to do too much. And he's trying to fit, footballs into very, very small windows or sometimes just making boneheaded decisions. And again, he admits that. But it's because he feels pressed. So I like the flashes of brilliance. Sean, he doesn't need to be spectacular. Like if the Jets win 4 or 5 games this year and they go 4-13 or 5-12, but there are more flashes of brilliance and there's, notable improvement as the season progresses, that's enough. That's all the Jets need to see. They just need to see improvement. They won 2 games last year with a 3rd-year quarterback in Sam Darnold. Yeah. If the Jets are winning, if their Jets are winning 2 games in year 3 of Zach Wilson, that's problematic. But if they improve with the rookie quarterback, even by a couple of wins, and again, those moments of brilliance are there, then that's enough. And I think he's fully capable of doing that. The offensive line needs to help him out. Zach needs to get the ball out quicker. He needs to be on target and not play with as many nerves. I mean, he's using his bye week this week to come home and work with John Beck. Like he's coming home to see family for a day, and then he's going to work with John Beck and talk through things. And hopefully that brings some composure and kind of a reset for Zach as he goes into the back half, relatively speaking, of his NFL season. They're 1-4 now. Just 3 more wins, honestly. 3 more wins, some more big plays. That's enough for Jets fans. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you brought up, Sam Darnold and how they only won 2 games. He's kind of thriving, having left the New York Jets dysfunction and now with Carolina. Got off to a hot start. They've lost a couple, but it is interesting to think that, we all thought Sam Darnold maybe was a bust, and then he just gets out of New York and all of a sudden it's like, oh, never mind. He's actually pretty good. And so that's what I fear. And obviously they've got a new coach this year, but that's what I fear with Zach Wilson, because being a BYU fan, and again, I might have my own blue goggles on right now, but I just felt like Jimmer never got like a fair shake in the NBA early in his career anyway. Sure. The Kings are just like one of the worst franchises in all of sports, and the Jets are like right there with them. And so it's like, man, why can't our top studs go to like the Patriots and be with Bill Belichick? You're watching Mac Jones do things that, I mean, he looks like the best of the rookies right now. He looks better than Trevor Lawrence. He looks better than Zach Wilson. And it's because, it looks better than Justin Fields and Trey Lance, but it's because of the system he's brought into and the team that surrounds him. So, right. I don't know. I just feel like, you go ahead. It's an interesting scenario, right? If Zach Wilson ends up with the San Francisco 49ers and is backing up Jimmy Garoppolo and then gets in and does some things like, all of a sudden, like Zach Wilson with the 49ers, who are their potential playoff team. He's the real deal. Yeah. The Jets are a significant hurdle to overcome. Yeah. But I feel like with the general manager, Joe Douglas, who, by the way, was the general manager in Philadelphia when with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles, they won their Super Bowl a few years ago. If they can piece things together with Robert Saleh and just build and stay consistent and not have so much turnover year to year, they can build things around Zach Wilson, which they said they were going to do, an offensive line. They're trying to bring in more offensive weapons. If they can do that, then who knows? I'm optimistic for Zach if they can just stay consistent as a franchise in terms of the moves they make as a GM and head coach. There's not any crazy turnover. He should be just fine. Yeah. Jimmer he was destined for failure from the get-go because of the ownership changing in Sacramento, the head coach being fired 3 weeks in, the coach that liked him and wanted him, all of a sudden he's gone. Like it was a terrible scenario for him to get into.
Yeah. Right. Toxic players like Boogie Cousins, it's just the whole situation.
Zach's in a better scenario. They just need to keep that core there with the coach and staff, GM, and the majority of the players. If they keep that core there for a few years, then I think he'll be okay.
Yeah. So one thing you usually hear NFL guys, I was just listening to Colin Cowherd yesterday, and he brought up the comparison with Josh Allen that you mentioned. And then he's not a huge Zach Wilson fan. He doesn't dislike him. He just doesn't feel like he maybe is going to be that great, but he was quick to say, well, but Josh Allen's 6'6", and obviously being tall is typically a pretty good advantage as an NFL quarterback because you got to see over these massive linemen. Zach's listed at 6'1". Is that right? Is he a true 6'1", or where's he at there?
He's taller than that. He's 6'2".
Okay, 6'2". Yes. So that's good. I mean, you get guys like Drew Brees, and I don't think Russell Wilson's much taller than 6 foot, 6'1", And
Russell Wilson's 5'11". He's shorter than us, Sean. No joke. He's shorter than us.
Well, okay. He's been doing it. So I just wonder if that's going to play a factor at any point, because you hear it so much. Kyler Murray's doing just fine. Drew Brees obviously had an all-time Hall of Fame career. So I don't know. I'm rooting for Zach. I really am. It's fun to watch him. When he had the game they won, I don't know if you remember, but he actually had a chance to seal it on a third down where if they had gotten the first down at the end, they could have just kneeled it and run the clock out. And he misses a wide open. I think it was Corey Davis or someone like that. Wide open. I was like, oh no, please don't let this game slip away. And to the Jets' credit, they actually did allow a score, but then they came back and ended up winning the game. So I thought that was a really kind of a signature win, if you will, for a young quarterback. I know it's his only win, but it was like, those were some interesting circumstances, and he pulled through.
Absolutely. You win in overtime. You got to rally. You got to rally in the fourth quarter to do that. Made some big time throws. I mean, just some crazy throws.
Oh yeah. The scramble for the touchdown where he's pointing deep. I was like, there we go. That's
into a small window, he splits a double team just with the laser to Corey Davis. That again, those are those flashes of brilliance where it's like, the dude's got it. There's something there. He's special. He just needs time to bake in the oven a little bit, for lack of a better expression. Let the cookie bake, Don't take it out of the oven too soon. He's going to be okay.
I like that. Cool. Well, dude, Spencer, you're a stud. Thank you for joining us again. I know you're there. Is it hot down there, by the way? You're in short sleeves in the sun, and there's your profile picture again.
Hey, sorry, just got a call. All good. What's that interview with you without 3 references to that awesome profile picture? Oh my gosh. It's warm. It's humid. There's been a lot of rain in Waco, but we anticipate 72 degrees, beautiful temps. Very calm conditions for Saturday's game. It should be ideal. It's Texas, but this is ideal for October in Texas.
Yeah, no more rain, no more slippery footballs. That's all I can ask for. So, all right, man, we'll appreciate you. And we'll be looking for you on the sidelines on against Baylor here.
You got it. Thanks, Sean.
See you, buddy. There you have it. Spencer Linton, such a great guy, good friend of mine. We went to school together, and he's always making himself available in the parking lot, holding his phone up. His shoulders are probably tired from all those, deltoid exercises he had to do with his phone there. But Spencer, thank you for being with us. Man, I hope BYU wins on Saturday. Baylor, that's a big, big game. And I like our chances. He says 40%. I think that's pretty accurate. I'll say 45%. That's all the time I have for today. I hope you guys have a great weekend. I will see you on Monday. I am out. Peace.
Thanks for hanging with Simply the Best Sports Take. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and check out STBSportsTake.com. Simply the best in sports.
'Cause we are